6th meeting of the Carson City School Board. Number 1, adoption of the agenda is submitted for possible action.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Laurel. Any discussion? Any public comment on the agenda? Seeing none, motion passes. Would you all please rise and help us salute the flag with Mike Walker? You know what? My vice president just recognized that I didn't take a vote on the agenda. All those in favor of the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We'll try not to skip ahead too much. Moving on to number 3, Superintendent Report. Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I have several items later on in the agenda, which I'll be speaking to later, so I'll forego my report at this point and turn the time back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing that we don't have Pioneer Carson High, we'll go on to board reports. Laurel.
Okay. For Fritch Elementary School, they would like to thank Alex Miner from Troop 45. On Saturday, he did his Eagle Scout project there and repainted and repaired some of the sheds that are out there and restained garden boxes that were there. So they did quite a bit of work, and so they'd like to thank him and all of the volunteers who helped out. And also they are preparing for parent-teacher conferences next week, like all the elementary schools. So Fremont Elementary for next week is also preparing for the parent conferences, and they are having a family science night with Sierra Nevada Journeys, and so they're going to have pizza before they get busy on engineering and other STEM projects. And then I'd like to report on the NASB. Stacy and I attended the National School Boards Association Pacific Region Conference over the weekend in Boise, and Stacy was elected the chair-elect for the Pacific region, so she will be representing Nevada in the Pacific region, which is good because we haven't had a representative in the regional leadership positions in quite some time. And then also I'd like to share and express our condolences. A former staff member of Fritch Elementary, Tricia Coleman, passed away over the weekend unexpectedly, and she has 3 children in the district. So we'd just like to pass on our condolences to the family and send them all our best. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Mr. Garner.
I was out of town, so I don't really have a report, but I would like to say that I think the week before last, I was able to attend the talent show that was put on by Carson Middle School. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the staff. They had like 1,100 kids in the gym, and they all were well behaved. And it was a great show, and so the staff deserves a lot of credit for keeping the kids so well behaved, let me put it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
I don't have an official report for the high school, but I just wanted to mention that yesterday I had the opportunity to meet in this room with the EDU 110 students, Mrs. Macy's group, and great group of kids. There were about 15, I think there's 15 students in there. I think all but one was present, and they got to sit up here and on the side seats, and we chatted about a little bit about what the board does, why we do it, how we got here, and then just started talking about a variety of topics that we discuss. And then I opened it up to what they wanted to discuss. And it was great. We had a nice conversation about what their concerns are. Richard, they'll be getting with you. No. No, but as you would expect, they had concerns about the high school and, the dress code, the earbuds, all that kind of stuff. We had a chance to talk about all that stuff. And, they're really, I think, well-informed, bright students. So, hopefully we get some of those students to pursue education and show up in front of Mr. Delphin and eventually become teachers in the district. So that concludes my report.
Thank you for doing that. I'm sure they appreciated your experience, too.
Oh, I enjoyed it a lot.
We'll go Dawn, and then Abby, we'll get you done after reports.
Saturday, the Nevada Day Parade. It's already here. And all three of our marching bands from the district will be present, the high school along with the two middle schools. And even the University of Nevada will be there marching this year. And there's more than a few district alumni in the marching band there.
Thank you. Mike?
I just wanted to echo what Laurel was saying about Tricia Coleman, and she was tremendous with the students, great mother, and great parent supporter and volunteer at the school. So certainly, we're going to miss her around here.
Let's see. So I attended the JAG induction ceremony for Pioneer, which was at the Governor's Mansion, one of the quickest induction ceremonies I've ever been through. It was very nice, very well done. A lot of excited kids. I can't wait to see what comes out of this group. And then I will turn it over to Abby for Pioneer High School's report, and I'm hoping you'll let us know how Winterfest went.
Hi. Okay, so for my announcements, first I have on the 18th, we had our first speech and debate in event in Spanish Springs, and there was 2 competitors from PHS. And then we had Career Day, also held on October 18th, and we had 10 students who went to Reno, the Reno Event Center, for booths for different trades and to learn about different careers and stuff like that. And then on the 23rd, quarter 2 starts. And then we have flu shots that are available for this week, I think on the 24th. And then we also have Spirit Week next week. And then on the 31st, we had a rock climbing trip. And then also on the 31st, we have a Project Discovery trip, and that's still a surprise activity. So that should be fun. And that's all I have.
And how was Winterfest? Was it good? Good. Well, you guys worked really hard for it, huh? Well, I think it was more of a Winterfest than it was a homecoming. It was a dance. Now that they have that new facility that got built, the half gym, the kids got all excited after they had prom there. So they went to the principal and asked if they raised funds, if they could have a Winterfest. So they raised funds. They were at the pumpkin patch doing cookies, and they did entertainment at the pumpkin patch. So it was pretty involved for them to actually take the stand to do it. So I was hoping everybody had a good time. I was out of town, but I would have come. Thank you, Abby. Appreciate you coming. Moving on to number 5, association reports. Seeing none. Moving on to public comment. Comments may be made by members of the public on any matters within the authority of this board. Please note that public comment will be taken on items marked for possible action before action is taken on such item, and members of the public are encouraged to comment on such items at the time that they are being considered. Although members of the board may respond to questions and discuss issues raised during public comment, no action may be taken on such matters until the matter is placed on the agenda for the action at a meeting of the board. In making public comment, speakers are asked to come to the table, speak into the microphone, and identify themselves for the record. Speakers are asked to limit their comments to no more than 3 minutes and simply not repeat comments of others. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, thank you. Oh, come on up and state your name for the record. Whichever one you want for the record.
Okay, my name's Rex Jennings. I'm back to talk to you again about trade school things. There are kids that love to work with their hands and learn things like electrical, welding, and things like that. And by waiting until they're either ready to go to the WNC, that puts them off. You need to bring back the shop classes starting at junior high because we need the trades. Every day, I'm retired from 2 jobs, not bragging or complaining, but every day, just for my own amazement, I look at Craigslist. And the skilled and manufacturing, it's crazy how many jobs people are, looking for people in this town. Electricians, plumbers, HVAC, welders, every day. We need to let those kids have the opportunity at a young age. My oldest grandson's in Eagle Valley Middle School, first year. He loves to weld. I've been teaching him. His little brother, who's 10, loves to weld, and I've been teaching him too. And I'm getting ready to teach him some woodworking. So we need to look at that because some of this stuff helps those kids. And I have nothing against STEM or anything like that. Not everybody's cut out for that. That's all I have.
Thank you. And I would tell you, as a person that works for a handyman, that those skills are very lacking in this community and are very high regarded. So that is definitely something we should be looking into. I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Thank you. Thanks, Raj. Anyone else? Seeing none, moving on to number 7, discussion and possible action on approval of recommendations of benefit committee regarding group health care insurance plans designed and renewal for coverage of the calendar year, January 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2020, for possible actions. Dr. Delphin and Mrs. Clark, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Wilkie. Sorry, can't get in the table today. Jose Delphin for the record, and to my immediate right is Valerie Clark. I should say the awesome Valerie Clark. She's here to speak insurance to you, and she's got some great news, and we're going to announce some really cool things that are happening this week. Valerie, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Jose. Valerie Clark, for the record, with Clark and Associates in Reno. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight, and just want to do my annual report to you about the benefits and the renewal. You had another good year. We've had some great partnerships that have been formed with Prominence Healthcare, our Prominence Health Plan, with our new Prominence Care Centers. We had our grand opening in May, I believe. And slowly but surely, we've got more and more utilization of the Prominence Care Centers, which are exclusively for the school district, and we're having very good results with that. We ended the year, our loss ratio was a little bit on the high side. It was in the low 90s. However, we were able to negotiate for the most part, what I would call a rate pass. We have the health insurance tax, which is a tax that was levied under the ACA, which will again kick in this year. So we did have to take into account that tax. And ultimately, though, we were given a 3.5% rate increase to take that tax into account. Ultimately, though, I would say we had no rate increase based on our utilization as a plan. So it's looking good. You guys are great utilizers of the plan. I think the partnerships that are being formed or have been formed are working very well for you. We decided to do a wellness fair for all of the school district employees, which will take place on the 24th, Thursday this week. And we've got lots and lots and lots of prizes and incentives and giveaways, and we're really looking forward to it. Also, your ancillary programs, your dental, vision, and life, no rate increase at all.
Thank you. Any questions for Valerie? Richard?
I was just curious, the 3.5% tax, what does that equate to in monetary terms for us?
Well, because maybe AJ, you might have the numbers. You have 3 different plan designs, and so the highest, the way the school district pays for their premiums, the most expensive plan, which is the high option PPO, is only utilized by 141 people. So for what you've budgeted, the actual number is only in the $60,000 range, $65,000 increase. The total cost, if you take into account each plan that each person is enrolled on, I'd have to defer to AJ on that.
It's an increase of about $300,000 in the district.
Yeah. Your highest price plan, though, it's kind of interesting. You would think that the highest price plan would be the plan that most people would be on, but you only actually have 140 people on that plan. Most of your population is on the high HMO plan, which is less expensive, and a significant number right after that are on your HSA, high deductible health plan, which is doing very, very well.
AJ, were we budgeted for that increase Or is that going to have a negative impact on us, on the budget?
The budget that the board approved back in June estimated a 5% increase, so it's within budget.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Joe?
Just a comment, I want to thank you for what you're doing. This, of course, everybody's looking at their health insurance now. We just did ours at work. And, we're a smaller group, obviously, but, the fact that we have a rate pass more often than not lately
Yeah.
is fantastic. I mean, at work, a lot of times we have to switch carriers or switch plans drastically just to keep things from exceeding 10% every year. So, whatever you're doing for the district, thank you very much, because it's, healthcare is kind of squirrely, and I think we're really well represented. So thanks.
Yeah, you guys are great utilizers. I mean, the partnership has gone very well, but your benefits committee is very engaged, and we have fantastic meetings together. They ask a lot of great questions. They go back and they talk to their constituencies. I meet with the constituents as needed. I just met with the transportation people last week, had a great meeting with them. They're engaged. They want to be a part of this the new partnerships that we're forging ahead with the Prominence Care Centers. I think we're going to get a great turnout on Thursday. I was given some great news yesterday by Prominence that they are going to provide some incentives for people to engage with the program. Beginning in 2020, anyone who just engages with the well visits that you can receive at the Prominence Care Centers, if you engage within the first 4 months of 2020, they'll give a $100 gift certificate to each employee that engages. And if you engage after April of 2020 for the rest of the year, they'll give $50 gift certificates. So we're really trying to bring people into the fold, get them really engaged with their healthcare, and if there's planning to be done, coaching that's needed, any type of assistance that we can provide, we are going to be very hands-on in providing that to the employees. It's a great, great partnership. Very excited about it.
That's a really fantastic whole health physical. I went through it this year, and you spend quality time with your doc and the health coach and whoever is in there to help out. It was a good couple hours. It was very thorough, and I gotta say, I felt really taken care of. So the fact that Prominence is willing to spend $100 to incentivize our staff is fantastic. When Valerie told me that news Monday, I fell off my office chair. I guess Prominence knows we're not very rich, but it was a great incentive. Also, with the Thursday Wellness Fair, we're excited to also open the doors. Our staff can get flu shots, pneumonia shots. Valerie and her expert skills of partnering with the local vendors here and businesses in Carson City. She rustled up a bunch of prizes, a bike, a bunch of gift cards. I was able to get permission from the superintendent to get a couple days off for staff. So we're going to raffle that off as well. So we're excited to invite all Carson City School District staff and their families to come and visit us on Thursday. So we'll be having our big wellness fair from about 2:30ish, 3 o'clock till about 5 or 6. So it should be a good time. At the Winnie Lane location right behind McDonald's.
The Prominence
At
Care
Prominence
Center.
Care,
Prominence
okay.
Care, yep.
That's what I wanted to know.
And I would encourage you, board members, if you haven't gone by to visit, if you have some time between 2 and 6 on Thursday, 2 days from now, they'll be doing tours, and it's a nice open house. It'll give you a great feel for what we're trying to do. This partnership is unprecedented in the state of Nevada until you. And I couldn't be happier for it.
I also want to thank, just want to thank CESA, OCEA, and CCAA for being great partners in the Benefits Committee. We've been having some great discussions, and we're going to meet every month because we know our fiscal shape is needing some fine tuning. And so we've committed to making sure that we are working together to make sure our costs are as low as possible.
And do you think there'll be any time that we ever get the family coverage more affordable? Because I know a lot of the teachers are on their spouses because ours are so expensive. Is there any way to get those lowered, or is that just the normal? Because, I mean, I don't deal with insurance at that level. Is that pretty normal?
Well, are you saying, you're talking about dependent coverage? Well, here's the thing about your program is your benefits are quite rich. You have just excellent benefits, and we've been able to keep your costs stable for so many years that we haven't really ever been in a period of time where we had to cut benefits dramatically. But as a result, because your benefits are so rich, it's the dependent premium is also expensive. I can't speak for the district, but I would assume any changes in contributions is something you guys would bargain over or something like that. It's certainly something we could discuss, but the cost of dependent care is a direct reflection of the cost of the employee-only coverage. And happy to get more detailed about that if you guys ever want to talk more in-depth about that. But our meetings that we're coming up with, monthly meetings over the next several months, are specifically to talk about cost.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other questions? Okay, Joe, go ahead.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees accept and approve the recommendations of the Benefits Committee as submitted for the renewal of coverage through the calendar year of January 1, 2020 through December 31st, 2020.
Second.
Motion by Joe, second by Richard. Any other discussion on the motion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those against? Seeing none, motion passes. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to number 8, discussion and possible action to ratify a interlocal agreement between the Carson City School District and Carson City to implement the school safety grant received by the Ccsd for the School Resource Officers Program, and authorizing the city to invoice Ccsd for personnel costs in the amount not to exceed $626,160.05 for fiscal years 2020 to 2021, with funding to come from the school safety grant for possible action. Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. During the 2019 legislative session, of course, there was a lot of interest in school safety, and there was money that was established to improve and increase different infrastructure aimed at keeping students safe and improving the safety at our schools. And through the efforts of the school district, we were able to be approved for some of that money to the tune of $626,000. And as a result, we have been able to recommend that 2 SROs, 2 school resource officers, be added to our staff. And we have those gentlemen here with us tonight. If I could have Mr. Earl Mays come forward, and our other SRO whose name has escaped me. Daniel, welcome. Sorry to forget that, but we're grateful to have these gentlemen as part of our staff. Sergeant Mays has worked with us from the beginning of our school resource officer project. And this, what we're bringing to you tonight, is a little bit different. Typically, we would ask for your permission. The Board of Supervisors met on October 17th. And so your counterparts at the city approved this process, and they needed our signatures, President Wilkie and my signature as well, as they were considering this program. And so this is a little different, where we took that step knowing that you in all likelihood would approve of this step. And so we're asking that you ratify this program tonight. And based on your actions, I'd love to have these gentlemen seated beside me to tell you a little bit about their professional history and the work that they will be doing for us here in Carson City School District.
I'm Sergeant Earl Mays. I've been with I'm Sergeant, is that on? I'm Sergeant Earl Mays with the Carson City Sheriff's Office. I've been employed there for a little over 20 years, and I've been with the School Resource Officer Program kind of part-time when I first took it over, and then full-time when this grant got approved. And currently, I'll be stationed at the high school with Deputy Dean Williams.
And you're going to be the sergeant in the proposal.
I'm Daniel Henneberger. I've been a deputy with Carson City for 4 years. I have not started yet. I just was told that I was going to be in the SRO program. I'm going to be stationed at Fremont Middle School, elementary school, so I could be central to all the schools. I'm very excited to work with the kids and see what the future holds.
Thank you. Any questions? Laurel?
I was just going to say, so do we have now an SRO at each of the middle schools? And does that give us 2 floating through the elementary schools, 2 at the high school? How does it break down?
So as Sergeant Mays mentioned, there'll be 2 officers stationed at Carson High School. Each of the middle schools will continue to have officers. And then we'll also have Daniel, who'll be working. And so the way it breaks down is that the individuals working at the middle schools will also have assignments at the elementary schools. And so we'll actually have extra coverage by the addition of these 2 gentlemen.
Joe?
That was my question, so thanks. So now I'll just go on to say, and, thanks for participating in the program. I mean, it's really important to us. I have a wife in the district, 3 kids that have gone through the district, and it's a fantastic district, but you know what can happen out there, and I feel really good to know that our community and our officers are, active participants and partners in education with us. So thanks for being involved in this.
Well,
And then I'd like to take a moment to thank Valerie for representing us there at the Board of Supervisors meeting. She did a really good job. And with Mr. Mays there, we really did appreciate that. As usual, the question came up with the Board of Supervisors is because this is only for 2 years, that although Valerie and the way the legislature goes, it looks like it'll probably be funded the next biennium too. But it is the thing that we have to think about. This is for 2 years and then probably have to come back. And if we want, they're thinking probably the 50-50 thing again, like we did before. Overtime and transportation are going to be handled by the Sheriff's Office budget. They've put in those contingencies in theirs, so there won't be any effect to the city budget more or ours in that part too. So I do appreciate you guys coming up to the plate, considering that it is a grant-funded thing. That's always a tough thing. We deal with this a lot in education for our teachers and our ISs. So we appreciate you guys wanting to be involved, and we're looking forward to it. Richard?
Yes, I was wondering, when I read the agreement, I didn't see if there's any commitment on how much time. Is it a full-time position that you can spend in the schools? Full-time, okay, thank you.
Madam President, if I might add to that, as you know, as Sheriff Furlong has sat in front of this board in the past, of course, he strongly believes that when we have our uniformed officers working with the students, and the fact that students are staying out of trouble when they're in school, what a better place than any place else to have uniformed officers within the schools, getting to know the gentlemen that are associated here tonight and in our schools in general, and having them serve alongside with the students so that they feel comfortable going to these gentlemen, and really working together to kind of keep the peace and grow up to be citizens that are law-abiding and interested in working within our community.
And one of the things that Officer Williams brought up, he's been at Carson High for 4 years now, and it wasn't just that, it's the relationships that they built, but because of Safe Voice, they get tips on people that are going to commit suicide. And he had an example of one of the students in the high school that came up on that tip line. Well, because the other officers for Carson City are busy with other things, if it's a busy night, they're not going to get to that call real quick. But he was able to go because he knew the kids and he could go right to the house. He could go talk. So you're talking about a 4-hour window that probably saved this kid's life. So it's stuff like that too that you don't see on the paper or in the agreements that, I mean, are invaluable. They're priceless. So that time and commitment that these folks do is just amazing. And I'm so grateful for the legislature for allowing us to get 2 more.
Yeah, it's a great program, and I think anytime that you can interact with the kids in uniform, the better off the kids are, and also for the relationships with the police. So, great job, thank you.
And it's just good for our community. It's a good thing. Looking for a motion, if there's not any other questions.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees ratify the interlocal agreement between the Carson City School District and Carson City for implementation of the school safety grant for the School Resource Officer Program and authorize Carson City to invoice the Carson City School District for personnel costs in an amount not to exceed $626,160.05 for fiscal years 2020 and 2021, with funding to come from the school safety grant.
Second.
Motion by Laurel, second by Mike. Any other discussion? I forgot to ask one other question. Because we were given these funds, they couldn't have been used for our existing officers, right? We wouldn't have had that savings to put in for $600,000. It's had to be a new hire, correct? Because I know I'm going to get asked that.
And just to add to the thinking, if you recall back after the shooting in Florida, the governor at the time brought together not only school officials, but safety officials. And as we talked about what is needed really in Nevada schools, the whole concept was about more bodies. We just need more people, more individuals who are in the schools in a law enforcement position, so that if anything happened, they were first responders, but really to help to keep the peace, and their presence really there is so important.
And we're thankful for Governor Sandoval to start that with that school safety task force too. So we appreciate that. Is there any public comment on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those that disagree? Seeing none, thank you guys for being here. Appreciate your time. We're looking forward to seeing what you do in the next 2 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard. Welcome to the schools. Moving on to number 9, progress update on the school performance plans related to the Nevada School Performance Framework, NSPF, for Bordewick, Bray, Empire, and Fremont Elementaries for discussion only. Come on up, folks. You can always grab more chairs. Oh, come on, Chad, you can bring your chair up.
That won't happen often.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle Cleveland. I'm the vice principal at Bordewick Bray, and I'm here to speak to you about our school and our celebrations and our vision. So if you take a look at our title, Bordewick Bray, we came up with a new and renewed vision for our school with our entire staff at the beginning of the school year. We really felt like we needed to come together as a community and to really take ownership of our school and of our students and of our staff. And so we came up with a new and improved vision that we all really took ownership of. And so we're really proud of our vision that Bordewick Bray's community, staff, and parents will collaborate to empower students to achieve their personal success and become responsible and productive citizens. And we really felt like that kind of embodied our entire well-being and how we feel our school should be run. So we're really proud of that new vision that we created this year. So going on to talk about our report card and how we rated this year. Last year, we were a 2-star school. And this year, we were really celebrating the fact that we were able to move out of that 2-star rating to a 3-star school. And we are still growing and learning from the things that we have identified that we need to work towards. But we are just really thankful that our hard work and the things that we thought needed to be identified and to start working towards really are starting to show. So the hard work of our staff and our students is really starting to show through. So we're really proud of that, to just start moving our school forward. One of the other pieces that we were really proud about is our school academic achievement indicators. Increased both in math and in ELA in our subgroup population, which tends to be hard to improve, but our special education population and our ELL current and former student population. If you take a look at our special ed subpopulation, our math moved from 10 points last year, or the year previous, to 31.6 points, which is a plus 21.6 point gain, which is huge celebration and very hard to do. And those kids on IEPs are really trying to close that gap where they are not performing usually at the typical rate of their peers. So we are super proud of that. And again, in ELA, they moved as well. They started off at 5 and moved to 28.5 points, which is a 23.5 point gain, which is huge again for the subpopulation. And just really proud of our folks and the work that's being done there with our special ed students and the teachers that work collaboratively with our special ed folks and the teachers who have those kiddos in their classes. As well, we had a change of our new ELL designee, and she worked very hard last year, filling the shoes of someone who was very successful with our group, and couldn't be more proud that, again, our current ELL and former ELL improved their math scores from 43.1 to 51.5 points, and the ELA, again, which is a focus, from 45.1 points to 49.3 points. So just really proud of that piece, especially for someone new to that position, working really hard with those kids and trying to make sure that her pedagogy is matching what they need. So very excited about that. The next point of celebration is Rebuy grade 3, which is huge. All 3 of our grades at that time, so our kinder, our first, our second, showed growth above the 40th percentile and scored on average above 60%, which is considered proficient. So for us, that is a huge celebration in trying to make sure that our students are growing in the right ways for their ELA literacy performance. So if you take a look, you could just see our kinder had 75% growth, first grade was 64% growth, and second grade 67% growth, which is huge. So we're super proud of that. Another point, ELL Proficiency received a 10 out of 10 on our scorecard. Again, super proud of my new ELL designee, worked really hard. We moved from 74.5% to 76%, so we are staying consistent with our ELL program, very solid, doing a lot of work there. Another piece that we did struggle with last year, we were the #1 elementary school with the highest chronic absenteeism. We are striving to continue to work towards reducing that piece, and we were able to reduce it a bit here. We're still working towards trying to reduce that further, but we are proud that we are working towards those pieces at our school. It is hard. We're the largest school in the school district, and so we just have more of people. So we are just working towards that with our SROs and with our Safe School Professional and with our truancy officer has been invaluable in helping making those connections and bridges to those families that we need to help get to school. Any questions about that piece? Okay. More celebrations. We are growing kids, which is, I think, the overall goal of any school, is to grow our children. And so I wanted to just celebrate with all of you that we are just super proud of our staff and our students. Our median growth percentile and our adequate growth percentile in ELA in all of the subcategories grew, which I think is phenomenal. There are things that we need to work on, but if you take a look, I just wanted to just note the positive point spreads that we gained within 1 year. And so we really feel like we are working on the right pathway to continue to grow our school to hopefully reach towards possibly a 4-star school. So we are just really working very hard and very proud of the fact that every subcategory is growing. So super proud of those pieces. Any questions about that? Okay. Actions of next steps. So there are some holes that we've identified and things that we want to continue to do and things that we feel like we need to work towards helping everyone continue to be on that same page and to have that vertical alignment when we talk with each other and how we work with our students, how we plan with our students, how we talk with our parents, how we collaborate with everyone to continue to keep that trend of growing our students. We are wanting to close the opportunity gap by identifying all non-proficient students in both ELA and math, and supporting our learners through focused, diversified interventions and student goal setting, which is something that has not been necessarily in place, but this year has been a definite focus. As you can see, we have a data board, and I know most of the schools do have data boards up now, and we have identified all of our students. We are all visibly aware of where our children are, and we're able to talk about what we see, what the trends are, where are we wanting to move, how are we lesson planning to get those kids moving and growing and continue on that pathway. We are also going to be using our support team, which is consisting of a literacy specialist, instructional coach, reading interventionist, EL designee, and our IEP team to collaborate and provide support services to our teachers and students. We do have 2 autism programs where most of our students are immersed into our general population, along with 2 resource teachers, and they are at full capacity. All of our students, we work together with our IEP team members to support all their learning and push-in models, so everybody is working together, along with our literacy specialists and our math specialists. Everybody's working with each other and in each other's rooms. No more of the days of closed doors. Everybody is working together in teams and in PLCs, and we're really working towards now more of a vertical alignment so that we can build that foundation in kinder and really move them through our grade levels through 5th grade. The next piece that we are identifying is assessing and monitoring all student learners. So regardless if they are Rebuy grade 3 or they are already proficient, we want to monitor the student growth. That's important. That's what we're here to do, is to grow our students. And so making sure that we have individual student goal setting and making sure that students are reaching their goals, and if they're not, what kind of interventions can we put into place to help support their overall learning path. We also have 21st Century Dolphin Club, so we do have that in place, as well as in our master schedule, we have an intervention block where we actually has a designated time where teachers are pulling those small groups to give those specified interventions to those students in both ELA and math. And then the last piece, providing teachers collaborative grade level planning time each quarter to align curriculum and to help analyze formative and summative data as a PLC so that they can help drive the rigor. And making sure that their instruction is absolutely with thought. And so with that being said, sometimes when we get together as a PLC, it is hard to collaborate everyone's ideas. We have large groups. All of our grade levels have 5 teachers each, except for 5th grade. We have 4 teachers plus our specialists. So our room is full when we are collaborating. And so it takes time for everyone to be heard. It takes time for everyone to have their own thought processes and professionalism. Everybody has a rich background, and so it's really important for us to align ourselves and make sure that we are planning to the standards that are put forth in front of us, and to plan accordingly so that we are hoping to make more gains with our students. And so that is what we have for Board Awake. Any questions?
Richard?
I was wondering on some of your specialists, I know that in their job description, I believe that they're supposed to spend 80% of their time working with students. And I've asked a question before, and I was wondering how you're tracking their time if they are spending that 80% of the time with the children, working directly with them or indirectly.
Perfect. Thank you for that question. They have been given a schedule out to the staff and actually designated how much time they are working in each of the different groups and classrooms. So I have an accounting of their entire day from the moment they come to work on campus to in the end. I know when their lunch break is. I know how long they're spending in each of those different intervention groups and which kids they're working with.
So you think they're spending 80% of the time then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else? I'm just glad that you brought a picture of a data board because Mr. Hicks brought it up that everybody had one and I had, not being in education, I had no idea what that was. So it was nice to have a visual. Joe.
Thank you, first of all, for the presentations. I think Mike indicated last year that we really appreciate kind of the condensed, focused presentations. Because after you go through all the schools, it was going for weeks and weeks and weeks. And this is getting us to the same place and giving us the same knowledge that I think we were trying to get to last year. So I appreciate everybody's time doing it. Michelle, you had mentioned for closing opportunity gaps that you kind of said, goal setting was something that we really haven't, if I understood you correctly, haven't really done as thorough of a job in years past compared to this year. I wanted to know if I heard that right. And two, I know you guys goal set and all that throughout, but what are you doing differently this year in general that maybe or what are you doing more of this year that you just weren't in terms of goal setting in previous years?
I think there was more of a global goal setting instead of an individualized setting. So, for example, more of a global second grade set for the whole entire grade level to achieve a certain percent as compared to individual. Michelle Cleveland, this is where your score is, this is where we want you to be, and looking at the whole entire roster of second grade to say, this is where all these people need to go, this is where this person is, this is where this person is, and actually taking a hold of those individual students across all grade levels to really push them and make those goals fit individual students and not such a general way.
And I think the nice thing about that is it also helps the teachers with their evaluations, because one of the areas that's really hard to see is that metacognition, and the children take steps to do something based on their understanding of their own learning. And so to document goal setting and students being involved in that process kind of kills two birds with one stone. It kind of helps you align, but then also gives teachers artifacts in spring that they're not trying to recreate the wheel. So I think that your teachers probably appreciate that as well.
Thank you.
And congratulations for going up to a 3. And we're glad to hear that PLCs are helping because by watching Fremont and Empire with their extra ones that time, that's when the board decided that we would put a couple more in there and take the realm of wrath from the public for not having the kids in the classroom for that. So we're glad to hear that those are being used very well. So that's always nice. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Richard.
I'd just like to say, I know that you've been without a principal for a while, so I just wanted to thank you for your extra work you've been putting in. And I think the board recognizes that you're doing a lot on your own right now, and so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next.
Oh. Tag.
Good evening, Susan Squires, Principal, Empire Elementary School. Thank you for allowing me to be here and taking time to share Empire 2019-20. If you want to talk about condensed, this is it. So we're going quick. Keep up with me here.
There you go.
I would like to start before we celebrate to thank every single one of my staff members at my school. They well, I almost said they make my job easy, but I'm going to change that a little bit. It's not easy, but because they are such a dedicated staff and love our children so fiercely, they will do anything to help our students grow. And they've continued, this is my 4th year with Empire, they have continued to astound me on a daily basis on what they are willing to do for children. And I just need to thank them for that. Every single one of them, our pre-K paras, our music teacher, across the board, they all work hard because they want to do what's best for kids. And so I needed to thank them. We are a 3-star school. Yes, yay. We have been stagnant in the last couple of years with 41 points for our star rating, which is a 2-star school the last 2 years out of 41. And got a little discouraged, I must say, that we weren't able to last year even improve past the 41. We jumped this year to a 54.5, which was a huge jump for Empire that pushed us into a 3-star. So simply, Empire, a 3-star school. So the things that we really wanted to celebrate about our school, in both ELA and math, the school median growth in math was 68, which, and tell me if I'm explaining this right, Dr. Ward, means that
You can do it.
means that would you like to help me, Dr. Ward? Help me out here. She told me, I wrote it down, but.
I know you can do it.
Do you want to switch sides?
I believe in you.
So you're gonna make me do it. Okay, I have it written down.
No one grows if I take over.
No one grows if she takes over. Okay, so our median growth percentile of our students, these are our students who met their SGP. The typical growth for an SGP is 35 to 65 percentile points. If we lined up all of these kids, more than 68, am I saying this right, made 50%, were scoring 50% or more, made 50% or more growth. Almost. So look how close I was.
You were very, very close.
Thank
I'm
you.
very proud of you.
Thank you.
So if she had all of her students, 50% of all the students at Empire made 68 percentile growth. So high percentile growth for more than 50% of her students.
Yes, thank you. And because of that, and that's huge for us in math, that is a great, great number for us in math. We were really excited about that. And I credit that to our teachers really having fidelity to our math program and finally having that math program and having it for a couple of years and sticking to it, all the parts of it. And for that, we earned 10 points of this section of our star rating, and that's a great amount of points to earn. And then for the same thing in ELA, our score was 52, and so we scored 6 points of that. So we were really excited in both of those areas to have such high numbers. The district average for those two areas was 60% or 60 for math and 52 for the district. So we either outscored or equaled what the district averages were in that area, in those areas. That's exciting for us. Now, science proficiency, though, this was a biggie for us, especially with our STEM, moving to trying to be a STEM school and really moving to that this year. We made a huge gain from 17.5 to 33.2% above the cut in science. And that was just a huge jump for us. And we do credit that too to having a science program that we're able to use and our teachers were able to use with fidelity. And then we're going to celebrate also our decrease in chronic absenteeism from 14.3% to 10.6%. We struggle in this area a lot. We have a lot of different things that we've put into place last year and then even more this year to help reduce that. It's difficult. We have many students who leave the country for months at a time, and that hurts us as well. Our office specialist, Carol Higuera, and Mrs. Paul, our assistant principal, work very hard together. They stay on top of it on a weekly basis. Our SSP makes phone calls as well, lots of phone calls, lots of home visits, lots of letters going out to these kids to help their parents understand the importance of them being in our building for instruction. So the next steps that we are going to take, so we're really focused on our flagged subpopulations. We know these are the areas that we need to focus. And if you look closely, for both math and ELA, one of our flagged subpopulations was free and reduced lunch in both of those areas. Well, free and reduced lunch at Empire is 100%. So whether LEP, Hispanic, IEP, white, Indian, African American, whichever are flagged, they're all flagged because they're all free and reduced lunch. So we know that we have individual flags, but we have to be working with every single student. We have to be improving every single student across the board. And that's a challenge that we gladly accept. So what we are going to do this year is our teachers are really focusing in on their instructional practices, really taking a look at what does it look like for me as a teacher in the classroom. When I'm up there or sitting at a group or monitoring students and giving feedback, what do I look like? What am I saying? What questions am I asking? What am I asking students to do? And so each of our teachers focused on a certain instructional practice. They have it posted outside of their classroom doors, so anyone who enters is able to see this is the exact instructional practice this teacher is working on. And we're encouraging everyone that comes into the classroom to look for that instructional practice and to give our teachers positive feedback, constructive criticism, so that they can become better at their practice. And they individually chose those instructional practices. My management team and those of us who evaluate or coach as we go into their classrooms are looking specifically for those instructional practices. Our professional development is based around instructional practices. When our teachers meet and look at our data wall, they are considering the kids that are on our data wall, choosing kids each week that they are going to focus on, and then bringing it back to their instructional practice that they're working on, and how is that instructional practice going to change the achievement for each of those students that they choose. So that's what we're working on this year for our next steps. And that is all I have. Any questions?
Mike?
I'll just say, especially good job on the science exam, because I think people don't understand that is a really challenging exam, but also it's so much reading. So, I mean, that's also a testament to how well your teachers are doing with ELA. So nice job on your results. And, a couple retired Empire teachers are working at my school. And so, for years and years, they've all been working to get to where you guys are now. And so their colleagues had sent them text messages. And so even your retired teachers are celebrating your success. And I think that just goes to speak to the school's culture and how long this has been coming. So congratulations to your school.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to address that with the science too. We are working, our teachers are working really hard to help our students understand claim, evidence, and reasoning. And we do that in math, we do that in ELA, and we do it in science. And so they're being asked to, make a claim, provide the evidence from what they have read directly in there, and then give a reason for their answer. And they work diligently on that from K through 5th grade in math, ELA, and science. And I think that has made a big difference for our kids.
Anyone else? Good job. Appreciate your teaching staff and everybody here for you guys too. We appreciate you guys being here. Dr. Ward.
All right. I'm Jennifer Ward, for the record, principal at Fremont Elementary. And I'm going to win because I have a quicker presentation than Susan. All right. Just saying. I'll let the graphic. Can't help it.
I didn't know it was a competition, but
It's always a competition.
between the two of us, always.
So this is really, I could probably do a mic drop at this point, but I won't. But if you can see, this is our history of Fremont on our trajectory. And so you can see with that we have gone from 39.5 points to 65 points in our school rating. So we are currently a 3-star school, one away from a 4-star school. We have recommitted to our vision and our mission that was dedicated about 18 months ago. And so as you look at that lifelong learner to the maximum potential is a huge part of what I will be talking about tonight. So looking at my celebrations, we decided to let the font size speak for itself. Chronic absenteeism, we went from 10% with a chronic absenteeism of 10.3 to 4.9. So, and this is a deduction of quite a bit. We're kind of talking apples to apples, but not necessarily in the same because the state did change their formula for attendance and only looking at students who attend our schools now 90 days, whereas previously it was from 170 days that they had opportunity to be in our school. So if they were in our school longer than 10 days, previous years, they counted for chronic absenteeism. So if you had a student who was here 30 days and they missed 10%, which is 3 days, they counted towards your chronic absenteeism list. This year, they have to be enrolled for those 90 days. So it did shift us a little bit, but you can see as my graphic size matters here, that 4.9% chronic absenteeism for Fremont Elementary. That has been a huge decrease and very much attributed to student relationships led to by the assistant principal, Cheryl Orketta. We did a lot about student relationships and that the number one reason students come to school is because they have a positive adult that will miss them if they're not here. So we had really created an environment with our Champions program where every student had another adult that was looking out for them and making contact with kids who were absent and making those personal connections, just saying, hey, I missed you. Where were you yesterday? I missed your face. And it just shows you that personal connection with the adult staff, with our students, has made an impact. On top of having Cheryl drive to people's houses and say, knock, knock, let's get in the car. And making those impacts as well. But most of it, we really do attribute to the positive relationships between our staff and our students. Looking at our student growth, I didn't go into all the MGP and AGP and SGP, but I really wanted to. But if you look at our student growth, we had 15 points for student growth out of 35 last year, and this year we went to 27, which just shows our students across the board. These are students who not only have shown to be proficient, but also students who are not proficient. And is everybody making their adequate growth, regardless of whether or not they're already proficient? So our next steps, and there's another data wall for you. You're welcome. Is really to live our motto of finding a way to help students. And we really have looked at every student having an individualized learning plan for reading and mathematics. We believe every student has the right to move to the right. So if you're in the 10th percentile, you have the right to move up. If you're in the 85th percentile, you have the right to move up. So it's looking at every student and their right to shift to the right, if you will. We utilize Power Hour, which is 45 minutes of giving the right instruction to all of our students. And that includes our students with IEPs and LEPs that are now in classrooms for the second year where they're no longer missing any core content. So our students do not miss science in order to go to special ed services or speech. And that has taken, I think, a huge impact on our special ed students, but also our general education student or teachers who at any given time could have 5 or 6 students in and out of their classrooms, and then having to try and catch them up with instruction that we believe is important, and really focusing on that first-time, high-powered quality instruction for our students. And we don't want them to miss that because they have a special program that they attend. And so we've worked really hard on redoing our schedule and accommodating all of our students. So all of our students are able to do a power hour. It's also something that has lessened our stigma, the stigmatization of, I don't think that's even a word, stigmatizing being in speech or as an LEP student or as a student with an IEP. Being able to say, oh, well, everybody's going to power hour. And so being able to everybody gets their peanut butter and jelly is what we say, is everybody gets what they need and not everybody gets the exact same. So it's really living that equity piece on a day-to-day basis. Sure.
So during Power Hour, are you utilizing your specialist teachers and your special ed teachers and speech language pathologists? Are they pushing in and assisting in classrooms, or?
No, we have a pullout so that everybody gets small groups. So a gen ed classroom might go down to 10 kids for, say, Miss Owen's class. Then Mr. Guzman takes a class, Mr. Maiello takes a class. Speech has their students. My reading coaches teach 2 power hours every day so that they team up and teach a group as well. And then my reading interventionist has 5 different groups. So we have 6 power hours a day. Our kindergarten power hour is a push-in model. So we believe that the socialization is important for all the students. So they push into those kindergarten classes. You're welcome. And that is the end of my presentation. Yes, it was.
Any Laurel?
Just here's the compliments section for all of you. Congratulations, great work by all the schools. I'm really excited to see the growth at Empire and at Fremont. Just really great job, you guys. Everybody's working hard. Everybody's putting our kids where we want to go, and I'm just proud of all of you guys.
Joe?
Yeah, well, same thing. Congratulations to everybody. Susan, I didn't get a chance at the end, but I think Empire's doing a fantastic job, and I really appreciate your leadership style where it's all inclusive. I mean, and that's what everybody's doing here, but that wasn't always the case in all the schools in the past. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of success because the principal is giving everybody the tools they need to succeed and supporting them in everybody's concerted quest, if you will. So congratulations. And Jennifer, you came to us a few years ago and said, hey, trust me on this. I think I have a plan that can work, and the proof's in the presentation, large and small font. So, thank you. But no, congratulations, well done. And I mean, it's a struggle to the star rating system, it's growth, but I mean, we're seeing some successes here. So thank you very much.
And almost a 4-star. I looked at that as 2 points, man. Anyway, but I do think it shows, and by looking around the room, we can tell that it's a collaborative effort at all 3 of your schools. You've got teachers here, you've got parents here, you've got other administrators. So we do appreciate the collaboration and the hard work that everybody's put in for our school district to rise to these points. So we do appreciate it. And of course, Mr. Hicks, we appreciate you being on board. Our stars have gone up since you've come on in our elementaries. So that's a plus. We appreciate that. So thank you guys, and you guys did really well on the shortness. Mike won't be kicking me under the desk now. I appreciate that.
It might be.
We'll see. Thank you again for all coming. We appreciate your time, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Going on to number 11, you don't have to stay if you don't want to, folks. We know it gets kind of boring. You all have classes tomorrow, but we do appreciate you being here. Moving on to number 11, discussion on proposed changes to the following CCSD regulations. 606 purchase orders, 606.2 bidding procedures for discussion only. Mr. Cornick. Oh, I crossed it off. We already did it. Sorry. Sorry. Moving on to number 10, discussion and possible action on following reviewed CCSD policies for which no changes are proposed. Policy 606, purchasing objectives, possible action. Mr. Cornick, sorry about that.
Thank you, Madam President. Board members, executive staff, thank you for having me tonight. I guess this first one's kind of easy. What it is the policy oversees the two regulations that have the changes. So we thought we'd just bring it up to you to show how it fit in and if you had any comments on it.
Just the only comment that I just noticed, the Board of School Trustees, I think we word it differently in some of our newer policies, so I think it's the Carson City School District Board of Trustees, just to update that language to make it consistent with our updated policies.
Yeah, that was the one thing I saw too, trying to keep the consistency. Any others? Okay. If there's no changes, Mr. Pavloks, do we need an action or just because of that technical wordsmithing?
You could take action tonight. If you'd like it to come back for a second reading, you could do that as well. You're agendized for action on it.
Yeah, there's no changes. I mean, if we were to make a motion, couldn't we just say, we approve it as is with the one exception?
Correct.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve October 22nd, 2019 as the review date for policy 606, purchasing objectives with the suggested revisions.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Joe. Any other discussion by the board? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, you have that one. Okay, now I'll move on to number 11. Discussion on proposed changes to the following CCSD regulations. 606 purchase orders, 6.6.2 bidding procedures for discussion only. Mr. Cornick again.
Thank you. Hope this one goes as quickly. Actually, some of the changes here have come out of AB 86, which was sponsored by the state purchasing. The Nevada Public Purchasing Study Commission, which I'm a commissioner on, every session gets together, north and south, and collaborates on their basic NRS guidelines for their areas. So 332 is basically public agencies, 333 is state purchasing, and 338 is public works. In each one of those, we have a committee that starts a year before legislation that kind of goes through the whole NRS section again and sees what might need to be cleared up, what changes might come through legislation. The purchase order section didn't have that much in there. It was more of a cleanup within the school district. Mr. Pavlakis did a fine job cleaning up my upstate New York garble. So, and again, these first couple lines are just cleanup language. The real change came at the bottom of this, in that we previously had a confirming purchase order program, and a local purchase order booklet that we used to use years ago. So those were taken out of the program. The confirming purchase order generally isn't needed because we do have a purchasing card program that can secure a purchase quickly if you need it. Again, on the back is mostly cleanup language that Mr. Pavlakis helped me with. I did add at one section just above the categories and monthly limits, requesting that anybody that does use a purchasing card or a procurement card to secure some goods, and it was coming to central receiving, that they notify central receiving of that. Generally, when it comes there, we don't know what they're buying because we don't have a purchase order to match it to. So at least we know who it goes to, who we can deliver it to, and an idea of what is coming in. Any questions on that one?
Richard?
Yes, I was wondering on the categories A, B, C, and D, I don't have a clue what those mean, and I'm wondering if, I guess people who work in the system know what they are, but should be some clarification what A, B, C, and D actually is, so people know.
Well, A would be straight across, so the first.
So it's just strictly monetary, just
Yes.
strictly the monetary
Yes.
value of the thing? Okay.
Right, it's a monthly limit and a single purchase limit.
Okay, so that's whatever the monetary limit is what the category is?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And then I just have a comment on the first page, the second bullet point underneath there. I just think you need another comma where it reads, other than disposable supplies, comma, shall be reviewed. So that would be my addition.
Joe?
Hey, Mark. On the second paragraph, that starts all ordinary and necessary supplies. It looks like we made a conscious effort to soften that. Before it said is required, the following is required. Now we're saying should be considered. Did we mean to be a bit more passive on that, or did we want to say is required? Seems like now we're
yeah.
saying, well, you probably should consider this if you want to.
Right. I guess I would say yes, we did kind of soften it.
Okay, and I'm fine either way. I just was curious if that was intentional. We thought we didn't want to be really held to that strict wording if for some reason, we wanted some discretion, I'm assuming is what we wanted.
Yeah, typically, we're not a centralized purchasing outfit here. We are decentralized. Most of the sites do their own purchasing because they are small purchases, but all of those are reviewed 3 times before they become a purchase order by for different things, right? When we get to higher limits, you'll see that in the next regulation that shows who does those purchases at higher levels to make sure we're doing it by NRS and good purchasing standards.
Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, these are regulations, so we don't really take a vote. But we appreciate you updating these and bringing them to us, Mark. Thank you.
Okay. And then the next one.
Yeah, sorry.
I think it's covered under that agenda item, 606.2. This one is more of the bidding procedures, and these are where the actual changes were in AB 86. And these would be the same for the state and for local governments purchasing. You'll notice in the first area, they raised the formal bid threshold from $50,000 to $100,000. And this is typically for bidding. This is aggregate numbers for the year. So, if you were to buy 100 TVs one day, you can't really do that again next month. Buy another 100 TVs. You try to aggregate them together. Further down, we had budgeting authority. We want to make sure that the site administrators are involved with these purchases and they're not showing up in our office to bid without their consent. And budget, right? We added in the third paragraph, we added a section regarding posting all our bid opportunities and all of our awards on our website, which we call the bulletin board in the operations section. This had been upgraded in the bill itself as well, Before it was a little more strict about doing online, and they're kind of loosening up on that and seeing that there's a lot more e-procurement going on. And people are using their computers to communicate more in procurement. Purchases requiring quotes went from between 50,000 and 100,000 requires 3 quotes from vendors, not a formal bid where it doesn't have to be advertised. And we elected to keep that within purchasing to help out our sites, so they don't have, there's a lot to that, getting to vendors and everything. As long as we know what they need, we can handle that portion for them. And then right beneath that, purchases between 15,000 and 50,000 require 2 quotes, which the sites will do themselves. Just some information, NRS actually says 25,000, but we elected to lower that a bit for best practices. And then with our purchasing, IV purchasing system, we're able to take those quotes, scan them in, and attach them to the electronic purchase order, so we have a permanent record of that purchase with the quotes attached to it. And then as you see at the back, we've always had this statement. We can always bid something if it's $50,000. We can we could advertise that if we really thought we needed to. But also, we wanted to make sure that we know folks, to get competitive pricing, they can always go out there and get 2 prices, right? And I have to say, all of our schools are really good. And if they have any questions, they call Jody in our purchasing office, and she's right there to answer their questions. That's all I have.
Laurel?
Just a minor typo. The 3rd paragraph, the very end of that, the period should be inside the quotation mark on the very last sentence.
Mike?
And Mark, I know that you were dying to come on a Tuesday night and explain purchasing to the school board, so thank you. So appreciate the information.
Thank you. I don't get to do it that often anymore, so I have to keep up on it.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much, and we're glad you're here, Mark. Thank you. Moving on to number 12, informational update on the progress towards completion of the inspections and the feasibility study for the property located at 1600 Snyder Avenue, Carson City, Nevada, for discussion only. Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. It seems like we've been talking about 1600 Snyder Avenue for a long time. And I'm pleased to be with you again tonight to carry this conversation onward. I'd like for you as trustees to know that with the help of a number of individuals, including my staff, and of course, Mr. Cornick and Mr. Johnson, a number of things have occurred. We have received information back on structural engineering considerations at the site, civil engineering, which includes drainage issues and things like our parking lots. We've also taken a look at most of the infrastructure, roofing. One of our partners, one of our friends here in town used a drone, and with that technology was able to fly over the buildings and actually see where the roofs had leaked. And so we have a pretty good idea about what's going on at the site, at least with regard to these items. We understand that the electrical and the sewer conditions at the site are up to speed in terms of what they were used for in the past, and are found to be within compliance of usual and customary activities. One of the things that we are working on right now, and I had indicated in my board packet with the executive summary, is that the appraisal is still being developed. I did speak with the appraiser today, however, and he's very close. He had a few additional bits of information that he was trying to track down that he felt was important. So I don't actually have that appraisal yet. And of course, that'll be a very important part as we move into the end part of this process. We were also expecting to have received the environmental study. I was hoping that we would have that yesterday, but we have not yet received that. One of the reasons that that is important is because according to the land patent of the BLM, that property at one time was considered a landfill, and it was stated on the patent that there was a potential for residential and commercial hazardous waste to be on the property, even if it may have been identified at one particular location and not to the whole. According, though, to the folks that are doing that environmental study, a BLM land map of that landfill has been located and will be included with the environmental study. And so we should be able to pinpoint more closely where that landfill was and where those potentially hazardous materials may have been located. So in order to accomplish that, we chatted last week. Mr. Cornick, Mr. Johnson indicated that we have a company that we've used in the past that actually can do core sampling. And once we can identify or pinpoint where those locations were, we can have those core samples ordered with the approval of the seller. And of course, we have to make sure that the property is put back to the condition that we found it, not go in there and tear things up abnormally. And so we still have that work that needs to be done, but because we don't have the environmental study, because we don't have the appraisal, with Mr. Pavlakis's help, we have appealed, or maybe I guess utilized our right to engage that second 90-day feasibility study. And so we are still within all of the timelines. I talked with Mr. Uhart today. He said that he talked with a seller. They are still anxious that we continue these conversations. They believe that the school district would be a good fit as a potential buyer. And so it would appear that we're moving ahead in a good way. And I have some additional information that I will move into in the second agenda item, but I wanted to make this report to you and see if there was any information or questions rather that you had about this information, and allow me to, or members of my staff who are here tonight, maybe to address any of your questions.
Anybody? Richard?
On the appraisal, you know, I've purchased numerous pieces of real estate over the years, and it seems like whatever you set the price at for the selling price of the house, the appraisal comes back right at that amount of money. So I'm wondering if by us agreeing to that price, if we maybe got ahead of ourselves and should have waited for the appraisal to come back without setting a guideline for the price of what we're willing to pay. And I guess it's probably too late to do anything about that.
So, Trustee Varner, thank you for that question. One of the things that's been going on, and maybe more specific to agenda item 13, maybe if we could move into that, hopefully I could address that question more specifically.
All right, thank you. And I just had one other question, is on the evaluation of the property, has the HVAC systems been checked in all the buildings, including the large new auditorium?
Based on the information that we've received back, the HVAC systems are likely to work for 5 to 7 years, that's kind of a ballpark. I mean, I have to put a question mark around that. There's no guarantee, obviously, on any of these things. And even with the buildings that we own, we know that some of those mechanical systems do have a lifespan. So while those particular buildings were not necessarily intended to work as they would in a school or in a commercial application, which would mean maybe for 8 to 10 hours under a hot sunny day, they are in working condition and will last for some period of time into the future. But there's a likelihood that to bring them up to the type of service that we get in schools, that there would have to be some renovation in the future.
Any other questions on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move to number 13, discussion and possible action to authorize the superintendent to negotiate a purchase agreement for the purchase of real property located at 1600 Snyder Avenue, Carson City, Nevada, for the price not to exceed $5,670,000, contingent upon the completion and receipt of an appraisal for the amount of the purchase price, as well as a receipt of the environmental assessment and such tests and inspections of the property as have been ordered as part of the due diligence investigation regarding the property, with funding to come from the proceeds from the 2019 B bond sale. For possible actions, Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to maybe begin right where we left off by talking about the appraisal. And it's been interesting in comparing maybe commercial real estate to residential real estate. And this concept behind an appraisal, especially for a school and a church, has been challenging. In our area, there have been very few schools or churches that have come up for sale. One, however, that we know of and that's being factored into this situation is the one that Douglas County sold, I think, within the last 2 years, and that was up at Kingsbury Middle School. And our appraiser has learned recently of another property in town that might also have an impact on what we're looking at here. So the purchase agreement is a document that we had first, and we were asked to put that document together. And so again, with the help of Mr. Pavlakis, we took the document that was the letter of intent, and we took the detail from that document and made it applicable to a commercial real estate document. In other words, we laid out the conditions and the situations. We knew that going into that letter of intent that the dollar price that had been established basically through that process was this $5.67 million. And I think at all times, from the letter of intent to the current purchase settlement agreement, there's a line in the documents that talk about a contingency for that price based on the appraisal and my mind just went blank, the appraisal and the environmental study. So those two things, I think, allow us some flexibility in negotiating the price. And so part of what tonight's discussion with the board and direction back to me is to finalize that purchase settlement agreement, which right now is in our corner. It's the ball is in our court, as it were. We have gone through what the seller has responded to in our first round. So I guess it's our turn again to make a decision on certain matters within that document. We'll send that back to Mr. Uhart, who will forward it on to the seller, and then they will have an opportunity to consider the things that we have proposed. But we believe that based on the appraisal and that environmental study, because both of those things will have impact on the value of the property. And if we see a condition that is too large for us to overcome, for example, I spoke on the telephone after our last school board meeting with a gentleman who is on the church board, who was also a contractor, and he helped to excavate underneath where the large auditorium or the existing sanctuary actually was. And he told me the extent that he went to make sure that that building was sitting on firm, correctly compacted ground. Because when he drove his excavator out onto that location, the ground sunk. And as he dug down a little bit, he found that that place had a number of old cars that had just been covered up by a couple of feet of dirt. And so had anybody had put a building on that property, it would have given, it would have sagged, it would have had all kinds of difficulties. And he let me know of his efforts to try to make that a solid place without any problems or difficulties. And of course, our feasibility study is proving those kinds of steps out, because we've not seen places where there's an uneven shift in the property or large cracks in the concrete or in the interior walls. So, but until we get that last little bit of the puzzle, I think we are not at a point where we can say without question that it's the right thing to do to move ahead and to purchase. But everything else looks really good. And if I don't know, the appraisal will give us some guidelines, I believe, and certainly that environmental study along with the BLM landfill map, that will give us some guidance. Because if you recall the night that we showed Mr. Berger's drawings on where we might add on to that campus, again, we would want to make sure that underneath that ground, using that BLM land map, we're confident that that property can either be, built on, or it can be remediated in such a way that it doesn't cost us a huge amount of money for us to add on, which, is something that we'd be interested in doing over time. I know that's still a little fluffy and maybe doesn't give all of the detail, but I am looking forward to having that document in our hands so that we can use it as we do some of these next important steps. So just as a bit of a review, and I know this is not anything new, but we have gone through a series of meetings with individuals, citizens, school staff members, trustees, and in all cases, there's been a recommendation to at least continue moving forward to consider this purchase. From our Citizens Committee, there was a suggestion that this would make a good elementary school site. We have had a number of tours by local tradesmen, engineers, people who have the skill sets to help us understand the construction conditions of this building and anything that might represent itself as a cost to the school district should we undertake the purchase. I did mention earlier that we are in a place where we are likely to need that second 90-day feasibility study that we have established in our letter of intent. And we talked a little bit about the landfill and the needs that we have to move forward with that. So I'm considering that after tonight would be our next feasibility study, which you can see the dates there, if we were to use the full 90 days. And of course, part of that time is, in my mind, part of the escrow process and a time that we would be wanting to finalize any of the steps for the purchase of 1600 Schneider Avenue. We talked a little bit about the assessment, the appraisal, basically. We have that Phase 1 environmental study that has been ordered. We're just waiting to have the document in our hands. I'll be following up on that in the next day or two. And if necessary, if we are able to determine that there's a need for Phase 2 study, which is actually where they take a sample of soil and they do the chemical analysis to see whether or not there are truly in enough parts per million. I'm not sure how they count those up. Maybe Trustee Cassiopo, you can enlighten us on the science behind that, but We would want to make sure that this is a place that's safe to hold school, to have staff members, all of those things that are important for the public. We will, in addition, be returning the purchase settlement agreement to the seller. And of course, we're looking to you tonight to help us continue to move forward, which is another step in this commercial real estate process. And then try to negotiate the final purchase price based on those items, especially as it applies to the environmental study and the work that's being done around the assessment of the property, our appraisal. And of course, before anything is said and done, the board always has the final steps or the final approval in the process. Here are a few items that have been accomplished, and I wanted to just go through some of these briefly because you'll see in part of the presentation that will be happening after me as Mr. Fueling talks about our capital projects update, that these are some of the things that he has identified in that capital projects update that will be taking money, especially as it applies to potential school bond that we'll also be talking about later tonight. So you can see that from a structural engineering, and if you have any questions about the specifics of these, I do have, again, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Cornick, who can add to this conversation. But as far as the buildings go, we had Manhart Engineering look at these, and they gave us some feedback that said really the materials were well purchased and used, that the construction was done according to current codes and codes at the time, that there was very little that had to be updated. They mentioned that in the framed buildings, you see the $35,000, there's some gable strapping that needs to occur. And but other than that, the other parts of the building seem very sound. And again, jumping down to the plumbing and electrical adequate for the current use, and without doing a whole bunch of additional work, it looked like that was ready to go. Now, the civil engineering, there were some conditions associated with drainage and parking lot issues. And so that's where you'll see a number that ranges from $170,000 to $350,000. So while that's kind of a big gap, it might also depend on what we decide to do with the property. And I know that's a lot of what ifs, but the $350,000 number would go in with the idea that that's what it would cost to rebuild that western part of the parking lot. And so that's why that number looks that large, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it would have to go that direction if we had another plan for that particular part of the campus. The environmental air quality study, that $3,000 that we're looking at there is just to do the testing. So because there are some uncertainties, we would cover things like radon testing, and being able to look and see whether or not there were any other airborne items like asbestos or some of those things. The original building on the property, built in 1988, is right on the cusp of when asbestos was being phased out of building materials. And so it's unknown if there's any asbestos or a small amount or some, but we would actually have to do some of that testing using experts who have that ability. I mentioned a little bit about the roofing. You know, typically it looks like it's in good shape. There's just a few places where there would need to be maybe some repairs. There seems to be in the overhead fire alarms and sprinkler system some of the equipment that is out of compliance. For example, there were sprinklers that were identified as being of the type that had been recalled in other buildings, and so there would have to be some replacement of some of those items. There was also a need to do some of the city's inspections that are currently out of compliance. And so that was an estimate that we received from those experts on what that might cost us. And then Trustee Varner, you would also ask about the HVAC, which there's likely to be some repairs needed and some modification or modernization. Our IT and communications expert in the district office had given me a much higher number than this, but I wanted to stay within the number that Mr. Fueling had in his capital projects list. And so again, if we're looking at, what might be an amount to get started in this, at this site and to move ahead, this is an area that might need some additional study and consideration. And so again, I plugged in a number that would be under the dollar amount that's in the upcoming capital projects report that you'll see here in a bit. From a surveillance perspective, you'll see that number was listed and proposed as $97,000. And then we would also have to upgrade the original multi-purpose building to put a lift in it that would have the ability to carry a wheelchair from the ground floor to the second story. And so that's identified as $100,000. And then there's a small amount that it would take to be able to repair the solar system that's on the roof of the original, the multi-purpose building. And then that brings us up to this approximate total there. And again, these are projections. These are numbers that we think are reasonable as we look at some of the things that might have to be done to the program out there. So before turning it over for discussion and input, not only from the trustees, but from any of the audience who might be here tonight, looking at this from a vision perspective or from a big picture perspective, we know that the community is growing. We know that the school district has really limited opportunities for properties. And as enrollment grows over time, how prepared is the school district for acting to meet some of those enrollment challenges? We also know that we're going to be talking later tonight about potential school bond and using monies from that sale to take care of some of the needs that we have in the school district, which could include purchase of new properties. We mention it here in our capital projects update. There would also be enough money left over for us to consider some of the concerns that we've heard around the community and certainly from trustees by expanding our middle school at Eagle Valley so that we could release some of the pressure that's being felt over at Carson Middle School. By taking on 1600 Snyder Avenue and building onto Eagle Valley Middle School, we would have effectively taken a look and a healthy swing at moderating some of the enrollment challenges that we have in grades K through 8. We believe that 1600 Snyder Avenue is available early. There's not a lot that has to be accomplished, but could be put to work as a small elementary school. We would likely have to look at zone attendance conditions and adjust some of those, especially as it applies to our middle schools. The final campus use is still in question. Obviously, there would be some staffing and operational considerations. We don't believe, however, that those things are going to be out of our limits and that we would have the ability to work within these areas. Of course, we believe that the current sanctuary, the building that would function so well as a meeting place for our school district, for our community, for our public, that would be available immediately and certainly should be considered as a great asset. kind of already covered some of these items. The third bullet down sits adjacent to city property. I think that's a real plus for this property, where we look at maybe having the opportunity to talk about even some trades with the city. And of course, certainly believing that this represents a really nice opportunity for the school district as we consider the big picture of managing student enrollment in Carson City. Questions for me?
We'll just go down the line. Laurel?
I just have a couple of questions on the inspections when they're doing the air quality inspection, because there were those 4 identified leaks. Is that also going to include an inspection for possible mold? Yes, okay, I'm seeing both Marks nodding vigorously, so I'll take that. And then another question I have with the inspections, will some of those, if the inspections reveal things that were not considered in the purchase price, I know sometimes you can offset who pays for the costs discovered, who does the repairs before, so would that be something to be negotiated in the final purchase price?
It's my understanding that commercial real estate and residential real estate are a little different that way. So while I think that could be one aspect, on the other side, the seller could say, yeah, but we're leaving all of our stuff there, or, some other aspect that might be part of the discussion. So it's hard to say exactly. I think we could bring that up as an issue or as a question. I think we'll learn more when we actually see what that appraisal does. For example, if you remember that site map, Snyder Avenue runs through a portion of the property. So a portion of the property is not usable because it's a road bed, and then the other part of that is on the other side. Certainly, things like that would impact the price. And so those are the kinds of things that we expect to talk about as we, move forward.
Richard?
I just have a comment, I guess. It looks like it would take about $6.6 million plus to get the building ready just to be occupied as is without adding on. And I'm not sure we have a clear vision of what we would use that for. The discussions we've had has always been of adding on additional classrooms to make it an elementary school, because we felt, and I think everybody felt, that the current building was probably not adequate to be a school right now. So it looks like we're going to spend $6.6 million, and I'm not sure what we're going to do with that unless we went forward and added on. So I don't know what the end game is, I guess. Are we wanting to spend $30 million or so to make it an elementary school?
Joe?
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, I think, I'm guessing we don't want to spend $30 million to make it an elementary school. We could build one somewhere if we had the land, but on the site costs, I know we were looking at the parking lot and whatnot. Have we been in contact with city engineering or anything about traffic studies and what kind of potential road improvements might be required as a part of turning this into a school? I'm thinking like the intersection with Edmonds and, what, I think we'd want to kind of have an idea what those kinds of upgrades would cost. I'm just talking out of my hat right now, but would they require worst case, controlled intersections, roundabouts, stuff like that? I don't know at what point it would warrant more than what's there now. And then, I think to the conversation earlier, I'd be interested obviously to hear the appraiser's recommendation. I don't know how much the established asking price, if you will factor into it. I know it does have an impact, but I'm not sure how much of one. I'm not sure the appraiser would tell us how much that factors into a decision like that, but I'd kind of be curious. Because I think, given the amount of time, I think it's a great property for us to consider and do some work on, for sure. I think it has a lot of potential. I just want to make sure we're paying a fair price, but I still don't know, and we won't know until we get the appraisal, if the 5.6 million is the fair price or if it should be lower.
And any further agreement is contingent upon that coming in.
Sure. And then also, I know we've been getting some advice from Mr. Uhart, and I've known Mr. Uhart for a while. He's a fine guy, very knowledgeable realtor. And I might have asked this question before, so I apologize, but is he representing solely the seller? Is he acting on our behalf, or what's his status?
Thank you. Mr. Uhart is working for the school district. He represents us.
Which is why we pay the commission.
Yeah.
Don? Mike?
I don't know, I've talked to you about this deal. I feel like we could have been a little bit more assertive in our negotiations for price. I feel like we've kind of rushed through these steps, and I'm not sure that I'm ready to move forward without some of these reports. It's, without the appraisal. I think Richard's estimate of how much it's gonna cost, but I mean, even you said you kind of broke down the IT costs to fit into our current plans. And we also have the discussion of, we haven't necessarily, we project that the student population is gonna boom here, but we're not quite there yet. And so we've also said, well, maybe we could buy it and lease it out to a charter school. And I'm just not sure that that's what we want, the taxpayers are gonna want us to put funds towards, if that makes sense. I just have a lot of questions about this process still.
Laurel?
Just a comment. The way I'm seeing it, this is still continuing the feasibility study. This is giving us the additional 90 days. Everything is still contingent upon the appraisal, the environmental study. This just gives us time to complete the work that we started and continue it. So to me, the reasons that made it a good decision 90 days ago are still in place. And to go forward with it, we're just going forward at the same, with what we agreed to before as a board. So I think the final decision to purchase it's still contingent on the purchase price or the appraisal coming in and that environmental study. So to me, this is, we keep going and see where this goes, because we've already invested this much time and effort, and it still, to me, makes sense to pursue this.
Madam President, if I might ask
Yes, please.
the board a question. So just in listening to some concerns here, would it be helpful to have a workshop with the trustees about potential uses of the building? I mean, we can provide the information about number of students in our other buildings, what a potential rezoning would look like. I mean, we've done that to a small extent. We know that we are not bursting at the seams to the point where we have to do something by tomorrow. We know that. We also know that if we buy the property, there's a couple of years in getting that building in place for it to function as a school or the type of school that we have within our school district. So there's definitely some things that have to happen. I'm just wondering if it would be desirable by the board to have that discussion with even some of the folks who brought their skills out there to provide this, some of this feedback, some of these inspections.
Speaking for myself, I feel like we've kind of had that discussion a few times. Even, I think we have a clear enough picture of what the options are. I mean, what I'm more interested in hearing about is the environmental study, the appraisal. Does the HVAC work? I heard somebody say that the air conditioner went out, it was gonna be $9,000 to fix that a few years ago that wasn't fixed. You know what I mean? It's just these different things that you're hearing that Those are the things that I'm interested in. I think we have a clear understanding of what our options are if we built the building up. Or, you know what I mean, expanded on it or whatever we wanted to do. I think that it's more the actual property in some of these studies and what we're seeing.
So we just have to, I mean, those things are still in process. They haven't, they're working on the appraisal, they haven't completed it, they're working on the environmental study, it's not done yet. So to me, it's keep going and get those results, and then that way you'll be better informed.
I just repeat, before we spend $6.6 million of the taxpayers' money, I think we ought to have a clear vision if we're going to go forward and be willing to spend additional money to make it a operational school.
Joe?
Yeah, I'm all for going forward. I'm just wondering, the suggested motion says, for the board to authorize the superintendent to negotiate the purchase agreement subject to these other things. And are we trying to get to a point where we're giving you the okay to negotiate with them now, or should we, I almost hate to put you in that position until we get these reports back. I think time in a way is on our side. And I'm just wondering if we are better suited to get these back. We can be a little comfortable with, what they say. Staff can present to us through you or however you want to do it, how they feel about these reports, and not rush into saying, yeah, let's start negotiating a price until we have all the facts in.
Just maybe Mr. Pavlakis can answer this, but is this basically like the letter of intent, but it's just extending the time period because we don't have those items? Can you explain that?
So the requested action is essentially the next legal step in the process. Under the letter of intent, the contemplation was that a purchase agreement would be drafted within 30 days of the date of the letter of intent. Well, we're now it was August 24th or so that the letter of intent was finally signed. So we're about August, September, we're about 2 months out rather than 30 days out. I think that all the concerns that are being raised today obviously are still concerns that Mr. Stokes has. He's outlined his concerns about the results of all the inspections of all the tests. So the draft purchase agreement establishes as contingencies the receipt of a environmental report and appraisals that are satisfactory to the district. And satisfactory can be in Mr. Stokes' opinion or in this board's opinion. But what we want to get to, or from the legal perspective, what I'm trying to get to is that we have a definitive document that is more legal, if you will, than the letter of intent, that establishes that, and Mr. Fueling has, in fact, that the deposit or the purchase agreement, that the deposit is fully refundable if the results of the due diligence review period are not acceptable to the district. And the question of acceptability is entirely up to Mr. Stokes and this board. Mr. Fueling, again, not only with regard to the escrow deposit, but he asked me to include language that the purchase price is negotiable and subject to adjustment based on the results of the appraisal and the due diligence review process. So it's kind of reassuring to hear that all the concerns that or at least most of the concerns that you're raising are ones that we're trying to address in the purchase agreement. I think it shows good faith and compliance with the terms of the letter of intent to proceed. There was one new point that I wrote down, I'm sure Mr. Stokes wrote down as well, that we need to check with the city to find out whether there's going to be any off-site improvements that the city might require if we acquire this property. So I hope that answers your question from the legal perspective.
Go ahead, Joe. Nope.
So, Mr. Pavlakis, from your opinion, we've got I think some of what we're getting hung up on is this price. We know it's contingent upon things, but it was kind of set. There's been talk a while back that, is it a good price? Is it a high price? Are we setting any kind of, and I'm probably using the wrong term, but any kind of precedence where we're setting ourselves up? We're leading ourselves into this price by taking this next step? Or do you feel not so much?
Obviously, I'm not the appraiser, but I'd like to let you know that the appraiser is Mr. Dan Leck, who's a former member of the school board. I've had a lot of history with Mr. Leck. He is an MAI designated appraiser, and that MAI designation is, my understanding, is the highest level of appraisal status that a person can have. I think that I totally understand Mr. Varner's comment, Trustee Varner's comment about when you buy a house that the house appraisal always comes in at the value. I don't expect that that's what we're going to see with Mr. Leck. My belief is that he will come back with a range of values, and I think that Mr. Stokes and Mr. Fueling are good representatives of this school district and well able to negotiate with the seller on issues that may relate to price.
And then my only comment is in the motion, it talks about the purchase will come from proceeds of the 2019 B school bond. So if the board decides not to go ahead with this, does that doesn't affect this at all?
So the school bond, which is coming up, the language is in an amount not to exceed. So if it was determined that this is something the board doesn't want to go through with, the amount just adjusts based on the other projects that we're interested in.
And Madam President, I think if it followed parliamentary procedure, I believe you could also table this until after you heard that particular agenda item, if there was concern about how that worked into, or if your decision works into that particular school bond plan.
Need clarification for purposes.
I'll make a motion. I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees authorize the superintendent to negotiate a purchase agreement for the purchase of the real property located at 1600 Snyder Avenue in Carson City, Nevada, for purchase price not to exceed $5,670,000, which is subject to receipt of an appraisal for the amount of the purchase price, receipt of an environmental assessment reasonably acceptable to the district, and completion of such additional tests and inspections of the property as the superintendent deems necessary, and that the superintendent return to the board with the final form of the contract and the results of his investigation at the November 12, 2019 meeting of the board, and that funding for the purchase will come from the proceeds of the 2019 B school improvement bond sale.
Motion by Laurel, second by Don. Any other discussion by the board?
So one more question, I guess.
Please.
So if we approve this tonight, you're going to come back to us once we get the reports and everything and say, this is, we think this was a reasonable price, and the board will get one more opportunity to approve or disapprove, agree or disagree. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board? Any public comment or discussion from the public?
Rich has a comment.
Who does? Rich, did you have another comment? I'm sorry.
No, that's right. I was just curious, I know that there was some correspondence received from the seller a while back with some additional conditions, and I'm not sure that we're aware of what those conditions that they wanted to add on. I don't know what they are. Is that something we discuss now?
Those items are still under negotiation, as it were. So what our recommendations are, go back to the seller for their opportunity to look at those again. So it would be that agreement, if we can reach it by that period of time, that we would bring to the board on the November 12th meeting. So we're still working those details out.
Okay. I don't see anybody moving from the public, so go ahead and call for action. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
We have 2 nays. So we have Richard and Mr. Trustee Walker with no. Okay, thank you. Moving on to number 14, discussion and possible action to approve the updated capital improvement plans for fiscal year 2019 through 2024 for possible action. Mr. Fueling.
Thank you, President Wilkie. Good evening, trustees. AG Fueling for the record. So at the meeting, the last meeting of the Board of Trustees, I presented a draft capital improvement plan. The district was required to have a 5-year capital improvement plan that recognizes the potential bond sale that we'll be discussing in the next agenda item, and projects that we would use those proceeds to fund. Since the last meeting, there have been a couple, I guess, minor adjustments to what you saw, but nothing of great significance. But just to take a little time to walk through some of those. The Snyder, 1600 Snyder property that has been under discussion here the last half hour or so. The purchase price is entered in there as it's currently considered. Again, there's about 1.8 million for adding some square footage onto the auditorium building so that there's some room for storage of equipment and other items that go along with performing arts, I guess. Under the improvement infrastructure line that we have, I also added in just the word design. That was another part that I had left off from the last time of, you saw some of the more detailed layout that Mr. Stokes provided in his presentation. Another aspect of that is to begin some design work based upon what desires the board has with what to do with that property, and to start moving forward with that. And just to note, as you look out 2 years later, in the previous iteration of this, I didn't have any bond. I had included 20 million of bond proceeds because we do expect that 2 years from now another 20 million would be available. But I've added to that line out in fiscal 2022 almost $20 million, assuming that once all that design work is done and we've, I guess, kind of formalized the desire of what to do with that facility, that we would be moving forward with more significant construction and improvements there. For Bordick Bray, again, finishing the tenant improvement projects and some re-roof work there, which is of the highest priority. Some of the roofing projects that were listed here have been jostled about into a year or two later, in some cases, based on reviewing with Mr. Cornick the kind of severity of need and what could possibly be done to possibly extend the life of what we currently have. Most important moving at Carson High, we discussed the football field turf, and Mr. Cornick and Mr. Johnson being here, they can I know there were some questions about that last time, and they would be a little more savvy as to the need to replace that. Eagle Valley, so I've increased that. I believe in the last version of this, I had set 7.5 or 7.6 million. We've added on to that about $600,000 so that Mr. Wallace can finally have his own personal lounge over at Eagle Valley Middle School. Of course. Right, Jessica. I jest, of course. So just with that, some more fine tuning and just kind of thinking more about programmatically what that's going to look like and adjusting for square footage and soft costs attributed to that. Again, the Fremont and Mark Twain projects are really old news in regards to this. That's not a part of the $20 million. That's a part of the carry forward of the remaining balance of the 2017 bond. And the rest is a little to finish some tenant improvements at Seeliger, and then of course the district office as always anticipated. So again, some of the re-roofing projects have been moved about. That's really the only adjustments otherwise. And this is for your questions and consideration. And if you'd like to drag Mr. Cornick or Mr. Johnson up here, I'd be happy to oblige.
Any questions? Don?
On the Eagle Valley, the $8.2 million, 910 classrooms, what are you thinking? Is that 200 students?
So we're expecting about 250 students. So
That would move 250 to try to even it out a little more.
correct. Yeah. So I think in the end, and you know, it'll vary year to year, but you would end up with a situation where Carson Middle School would have approximately 900 to 1,000 students, and Eagle Valley would have approximately 900 to 1,000 students. So you'd have balanced middle schools, which clearly would help Carson Middle given their current situation, and benefit Eagle Valley as well in that having more students, more staff, there's more programming options that would come to that school that currently Carson Middle can offer, but just simply because of size, Eagle Valley can't at this time.
Yeah, I guess that was my question, if that'd be enough to even them up.
Right.
Okay.
But that would be something the board would still have to approve as adding additions to Eagle Valley, correct?
So by it being a part of the capital improvement plan, you're kind of giving direction that we can move forward and going down this path. However, given the price tag on it, there's other approval that would have to come with contract with either CMAR or whoever that would be.
Okay. And then the only other thing, in that school safety grant that we got for the SROs, there was also $500,000 for safety improvements. Is that a capital projects or is that something else that we're using that money for?
So it's a little bit of a mix. The one, and Mr. Johnson can correct me if I'm wrong, the one kind of larger major project, and in saying that, I think we have it estimated at $75,000, is fixing the entry vestibule at Eagle Valley, which if you've gone into Eagle Valley Middle School, those entrance doors are kind of confusing, and I've gotten lost in there a couple times. So that's for security and safety. That's something that we had discussed our proposed fixing. A lot of the other projects, for the most part, are not quite as expensive. There's a lot of each school, the doors would have like a key fob for entry instead of keys. So as one of the measures. So that's kind of a door by door. I think generally the door is between $1,500 and $2,000 per door. So not like major capital project. There's laminate film going up on some of the windows. Trying to think of some of the other. Oh, yeah. Come on, Mark. Come on. You know more than I do.
replacing entry doors at Carson High.
Name for the record.
Mark Johnson, for the record. Replacing entry doors at Carson High and at Borderwick. The storefront doors, and we'll be putting the film on it as well. Pass-through entries at 6 of the schools where you have glass, where you have the main entry, where you have just a small opening for secure entries. And you have the cameras, additional cameras in, I think, most all the schools. It's about 8 different projects from small. We're doing a new entry also at Fritch as well. That's a smaller one. But the biggest one is Eagle Valley.
Right. So it's spread pretty well across all the schools. With the only larger, I mean, you get back to the question of the capital project, really is that Eagle Valley entrance is kind of the large, and then Fritch, then those are the larger two.
Key fob.
Right.
Key fob is rather large though as well.
It's a lot of doors.
What are the key fob though? What exactly does that mean?
What it is they got a proposal for like 15 of the school sites to gain entrance for like staff at a couple different entries, maybe just like one entry for the small schools or 2 entries or 3 entries where you just swipe to get into the school in lieu of a key, regular key. Not for the classrooms, but for the main entrances.
I guess one of the questions I have, and I know I heard Laurel kind of saying the same thing, seems like some of these schools, it feels like we keep redoing the same thing over and over again. So, I mean, it's almost like, do we have a strategic plan so that we're not redoing Fritch's doors every time? Or if our plan is insufficient for Eagle Valley, you know what I mean? Like that should have been caught early on, so we're not always having to redo the same thing, and we could kind of start looking at other areas that we want to address.
Well, some of these doors are like 15 years old that we're redoing or 10 years old. These aren't doors that we just did 2 years ago.
Because we did the Fritch entry not too long ago. Did something change in what when I was first on the board, that was something we did, the secure entries, and they redid the office.
And the French, they're just doing a little remodel to make it more secure.
So are there new standards on secure entries that
they're
we're
making a
updating
little,
to?
and they're just doing, they're doing a conceptual, and it could be real simple as adding a glass entry on the front. Like if you walk into Fritch, like we're doing 6 glass entries on, like at Carson High. When you walk into Carson High, it's completely open. Somebody can jump across. Like when you walk into Carson High School and you walk into Borderwick.
Oh, to the desk where the.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so that could be one of the options on that remodel there for secure entry is to make a glass entry there.
Okay.
And I should say too, a part of the grant, one of the requirements from the state was any district planning to apply for it, they had to have, I forget the technical name for it, but basically an official safety study of their district and all of that. So we had a gentleman by the name of Jeff Kay come through about 1.5 years ago and give an assessment of the entire district. And so the Homeland Security too, thank you. So everything that we're requesting had to be somewhere in line with what recommendations were given in that document.
So where will that show up in the budget if it's not showing up in capital projects? Where is that $500,000 going to show up?
That's a good question. We have not in the past, I have not in the past specifically shown grant money in there. So really in the revision of this, and I did not think about adding that in, but that truly is, I mean, some of that is capital project that should be included here, and showing that grant fund as a revenue. I just generally don't think of the grant fund as funding capital projects, so it just escaped me. But
I don't think we've had a grant at this magnitude either, have we? Haven't more than $500,000?
Not for a capital project type item. So that's definitely something that I will add in December when we get to the amended budget.
I would appreciate that, just so we can track it. Any other questions? Richard?
In 2022, you set aside $19 million to add on to the 1600 Snyder if the board approves the purchase of it. How much, you may want to say, Mark, I don't know. How big a school can you build for $19 million? I mean, we have some conceptual drawings, thanks. Could we get to where we want to be with those conceptual drawings for $20 million?
So the answer is yes for the smaller version, kind of the base version that Mr. Berger came up with. And I would say near where we would be. I think the final square footage size Mr. Berger had come up with for the larger school was in the upper 50,000 square foot range. And so 19 million with current prices, and again, price escalations have been an issue, gets us almost to 50,000 square feet of additional space. So I would say it gets us pretty close, if not there, as long as the cost escalations don't continue on a 15% trend upward.
And if it doesn't quite get us there, is there any availability of other money to get the project finished where it needs to be?
So your bonding capacity is very much dependent on your property tax revenues coming in, what they look like. So if those continue to go up this last year, assessed value was up over 6%. We don't receive all of that due to the abatement laws. But overall, I think our tax revenues are, I'd have to look, I think they're projected to go up a little over, I think it was close to 4.5%. On top of that, we, in this last session, worked with Mr. Kramer to pass AB 244, which gives us the opportunity, if so needed, to go to the voters for potential extra revenue. So we do have that option. We do have our regular capital projects revenues. Those are generally $600,000 to $700,000 a year kind of projected going out. So there's something there to help out as well. So there are options, I guess. The cleanest option where we are right now with this is 2 years from now, not quite sure how that will fund out, but there are options.
AJ, just in general, when we're talking, a lot of these all these improvements are needed, one way or another. But when we look at things like the Snyder complex, and we're talking about part of this bonding, maybe going for that, we're going to build a new elementary school at some reduced size. Let's say just ballpark, there's 300 students in it. It's going to involve a certain amount of staff, 40 teachers, let's say, support staff, and all the stuff that goes into a school. But we're not necessarily getting more money from an increased student population. My question is, what's that going to do to our budget down the road? Are we going to be able to absorb this and be, not in a challenging state?
That is we're having kind of worries about continuing operating with where we are and what we have, right? So that is it's an excellent question. It's one that I think about all the time. So what I would say, I think in answer to that is clearly operating another school, whether it's small or large, there's going to be additional operating costs that come with it, and a significant portion of that is going to be staffing. What we don't know is what our operating revenues, our general fund revenues are going to look like going into the next session. We have an idea for next year what they look like, and there's some concerns there. And right now, on a preliminary basis, what we know about when the next biennium starts, things clearly don't look that great for us. But we also don't know that that is absolutely certain. So, there's a bit of a juggling act between the concerns of capacity and students and needs on that side versus also the reality of operational costs that we have to manage. So I think that it's something clearly you have to take in consideration, but I think also we don't have an absolute answer. And if it were to be that, amazingly, the next session is going to start just a little over 12 months from now. So we're going to be learning pretty quickly, hopefully, what that new funding mechanism is going to look like, what the potential outcomes are. And I think if we needed to make a knee-jerk reaction because of a bad outcome, we could certainly do that. But that bad outcome, at some point, it's going to come out of that. So, a part of the Snyder piece to me, and I focus in my mind much more on the long-term, what I believe is going to be the long-term need for capacity and space, just from the standpoint of, at the elementary level, having the class size requirements on how many students you can have, having facilities that operate more efficiently than portables, things like that. So it's not a great answer to your question. It's clearly, it's very much a concern of mine, the operational piece of that, but we also aren't quite sure what that's going to look like, but every step of the way we should be thinking about it.
Laurel?
Just a question too, on the Eagle Valley additions. Was this a recommendation from the Bond Oversight Committee? Or is this something, because I know it's been talked about when I've been there, and it's been talked about, there was also a discussion of if the purchase of Snyder went through and it was an elementary school, if it would ease enough to put sixth grade back in all the elementary schools to ease up on the middle school. So I'm just wondering, is there more that needs to be done to make sure the community in that neighborhood would be okay with the addition at Eagle Valley, and just to make sure we're ready to go forward with that?
We have discussed this with the Bond Oversight Committee, but there has not been a formal approval. And when that question was asked here tonight, I wrote down that we probably should come back and have that discussion. But that would certainly impact what you might do on this particular item, which is okay. I think we still have time to do that. But what we were thinking made sense in lieu of not having the capital to build an all-out third middle school is to try and alleviate some of the large numbers at Carson Middle, have two uniform middle schools that for some period of time into the future would manage those growing pains that we have right now. And because of the uncertainty really of the student enrollment in the next 10 to 15 years, it might cover our needs for the next 10 to 15 years, but that's certainly something that we can't do without your help. So to us, it made logic sense. We do need to bring it to you folks for some guidance, for your stamp of approval, but certainly the building costs aren't getting cheaper.
Also, if I may add, I think on some of the meetings we had with citizens committees, they kind of recommended that we look at going that way to add on to the Eagle Valley.
And as we know, we get these 5-year projections every time with the capital projects, but as you'll recognize, the administration building always seems to end up at zero by the time you look at it when we finalize the budget. So none of these numbers are really set in stone. It's just a guideline for the budget. So we need to keep that in mind too. So we keep trying, but the administration building, it's going to have to get something done, or we're going to have to start all over. So
That'll be a retirement.
So, I'd like to see that line item stay for a change. Any other questions? Seeing none. Is this action? So it's for possible action. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve the updated capital improvement plan as presented for fiscal years 2019 through 2024.
Motion by Don, second by Richard. Any other discussion by the board?
Just a question, are we going, when we proceed again in December, we'll update that grant into it too?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there could be a lot of changes depending on what goes on in some of those line items. Any other discussion or comments from the public? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Whew. Okay, moving on to number 13, or 15. Discussion and possible action on resolution designated as the 2019 B School Board or School Improvement Bond Resolution, declaring the necessity of incurring a bonded indebtedness on behalf of the Carson City School District for the purpose of acquiring, constructing, improving, and equipping school facilities of the district, authorizing the issuance of the Carson City School District, Nevada General Obligation Limited Tax School Improvement Bond Series 2019B in the maximum aggregated principal amount of $20 million, providing the form of bonds and their payment, and providing the effective date for possible actions. Mr. Fueling, and welcome, Mr. Johnson. Thank you so much for staying this late. I know that you're, right? But we had to go in this order, otherwise we would have had you up sooner, you know that. Go ahead, AJ.
All right, thank you, President Wilkie. Today, I have Mr. Marty Johnson, the district's bond advisor, joining us to answer questions and talk a little bit about the potential sale of a 2019 school improvement bond. Back in 2010, the voters of Carson City approved a 10-year rollover bond question. And in that process, the district also reduced our debt service rate from 47 cents to 43 cents. In the 2015 session, work done by the legislature extended that authority until 2030. So today, there's a resolution for your consideration to authorize the sale of a school improvement bond, and in an amount not to exceed $20 million that is fully funded by that 43-cent debt levy. The projects that we are considering are those within the capital improvement plan. And we are moving along in that process. This afternoon, we just had our ratings call with Moody's, right? Moody's. That went very quickly and very well because we just had a ratings call with them like 3 months ago. So there wasn't a whole lot of change in 3 months to discuss.
And we're still ranked number 1 in Nevada? Okay, thank you.
Give all the credit to Marty. He's a great talker. Currently, upon the approval of the resolution, the sale date we have planned is November 13th and closing on December 4th. So that would be the point where the district would actually have funds available to begin working on projects that the board has approved. So with that, I'll defer to Mr. Johnson if there's anything he'd like to add.
Yeah, maybe let me. For the record, Marty Johnson with J&A Consulting Group. Let me just add maybe a couple of additional thoughts to what AJ just said. One, if you remember, we came to you, I believe it was in July, with the resolution to start this authorization process. And so we have authorized $40 million of bonds. So this resolution is just to do 20. That approval from the Debt Management Commission that we received in August is good for 3 years. We can issue those bonds in as many or as, well, we've got to do at least one series to issue any bonds, but we can issue them in as many series as we want. So the approval relates to that maximum dollar amount of 40 million. So, we've got a maximum of 20 here. If it ends up becoming 10 for whatever reason, we can come back and do 10 again next spring. We have that kind of flexibility in all of this. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. And then secondly, this resolution does talk about 2019 B bonds, which means that this is a transaction that to, not throw off the marketplace. While we can sell 2019 bonds that close in 2020, we don't typically do stuff like that. And so this is a deal that, to the extent possible, we'd probably want to try and have closed before the end of the calendar year. And with, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then a Fed meeting sandwiched in between those two, which we generally try and avoid when we're scheduling sale dates for bonds. If we can get it done before Thanksgiving, that would be great. If it ends up being after, there's going to be a very narrow window that, we, along with almost everybody else in the country, is going to be trying to get their bonds sold in that same time frame. So I'm hoping that we can get this done on the time frame that we've identified. So with that, I'd be happy to let AJ answer any additional questions.
Any questions? Okay, easy peasy. We do appreciate all your hard work for us though, Marty. And he's right, you are definitely part of why we get to brag. Looking for a motion then so we can get going.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve the 2019 B School Improvement Bond Resolution as submitted, authorizing the superintendent to arrange for the sale of general obligation limited tax school improvement bonds, Series 2019 B, in an amount not exceeding $20 million.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Richard. Any other discussion by the board? Seeing none, any public comment or discussion from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Motion passed. Thank you again, Marty, for spending time with us tonight. Moving on to number 16, discussion and possible action on process for completing the superintendent's annual evaluation for the 2019 calendar year for possible action. So we're at that point now where we're down to 3 meetings. So, not that I'm counting. Well, we could be down to 3 meetings depending on what you do on the next agenda item. But, so, I wanted to, I wanted to get together so we could get first of all, so you could look over the forms. And Richard and Lupe, these are new to you, so we wanted to have you guys get a good look and get any changes from the rest of the board that you guys want to do to these, any discussion you want to have on these.
So, obviously, I don't know, those of you who are new, Trustee Wilkie and I worked with Mr. Stokes on this a few years ago. So I guess one of the questions I have for Mr. Stokes is, do you have any suggestions for this process? Or is there anything that you're feeling is lacking or that you believe we should revise?
Trustee Walker, I think that the system has evolved nicely. I like the changes that have been made in the last couple of years, rather than kind of running for prom king kind of mentality, if you know what I mean. I think that part has been certainly more to my liking. As far as the documents and the expectations, I think those are what a superintendent should be judged on, so I don't have any difficulties with the forms or the items that are found therein.
Hey, Joe?
I would, speaking for myself, I would agree with Mr. Stokes. I think we've made some adjustments to it over the last few years, and I think it's become a pretty concise document to, be able to, rank, if you will, the superintendent now and in the future. So, I'm happy with how it's progressed and where it is.
I think, and I'm not sure, Renee, was it last year, there was some something happened. I don't know if it got sent to everybody as a PDF, and so then we weren't able to type onto the actual document, or was that one of the years? So I don't know. I mean, I think we just want to make sure that it makes it easier for us, and I'm sure for you. Yeah, yeah.
Or a Google Doc.
Yeah.
We could really be updated and do Google Doc.
I don't think everybody wants to see everybody else's stuff if it was a shared Google Doc. And then
Well-
just, did you want us to kind of come up with a time frame on when you'd like these to be completed, Stacy?
Because I didn't know if anybody would have any changes. And November 12th, we're still going to be dealing with the Snyder issue. So I was thinking this would give everybody, if everybody could get their forms back to Renee by the 18th of November, she could send them out between now and, well, anytime after November 5th, probably. Would that give you time?
To send you the form?
Mm-hmm.
I can have the forms in the mail tomorrow.
After the 5th.
And I
So,
can-
because
can
I will
whatever you want.
lose them in 3 weeks.
You tell me when you want me to send them.
I think more time would be better.
Trustee Wilkie and I.
Yeah, if she can send them tomorrow. There's no
Okay.
changes to them.
So she can send them by the end of this week. Give you time, no pressure. She'll send them by the end of the week. Then if you have questions or if you need to ask Richard anything in between, feel free. And then we'll have a deadline of the 18th. Does that give you enough time or, well, you're gonna have them early. So we're gonna have them the 15th because that'll be a Friday. So have them to Renee back by the 15th. And then that'll give her time to have them copied and distributed to everybody and put in our packet so that they're all good. So Richard, just for your knowledge, what we do is we used to just get the form and then we would bring it to a meeting and we would, I like prom king, but I always thought of it as a firing squad myself. So we changed it so that we can we all do the forms, and then you can see what everybody else says too. And Richard gets to see them too beforehand, like a regular evaluation would be. So if there's some misconceptions, that he would have that opportunity to go, I think you're misinformed, our actual graduation rate is this or that. Or he'll be able to highlight and say, this is what I've done, in this area. And it just gives a little bit more back and forwardness without saying, I'll have to get back to you, I'll have to get back to you. It's been streamlined. And then we don't go over it, when we get it in public, we don't go over every single point. We give a general, and because you have comments and they are public, but you can also give a little bit of feedback too. But it's been a little bit more collaborative and better constructive advice from us and better constructive from Stokes to let him know what we need. And I think it makes it easier too at one day when we get a new superintendent that they feel a little bit more comfortable with the process too. So, but if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to call me or Mr. Stokes or any other of the veteran school board members, and I will relay that to Lupe too. But so
then are you looking at having that be on the November 26th meeting?
it will be on the November 26th meeting. Right? That'll work? Except.
No, it will work. Let me just get the microphone. I was trying to avoid it, but I guess I'm gonna have to. No, I've got one.
Oh, we'll have to remember you have a microphone.
So last year, Trustee Wilkie, if I recall, once the documents were sent to me, so in this case, it would be November 15th, then I compiled all the comments and all the scores, and then we had one final document then that was presented and included in the board packets. So in this case, then that would be on that November 26th meeting.
Correct. And I think I would probably meet with you on the 16th so that we can make sure the scores and everything are
So
right.
Friday, November?
Well, it would be the 18th.
Correct.
Because it would be a Monday.
Correct.
And we'll set a time away for an hour just to go over so that we're double checking everything.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so that'll be on the 26th.
You want a motion?
If, the only action would be if we were changing the form, wouldn't it be, or we're gonna okay the process?
Yeah, you can accept the form and approve the process as in prior years.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Don.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve the process as presented for completing the superintendent's annual evaluation for the 2019 calendar year to be completed during the November 26th board meeting.
Second.
Motion by Don, second by Mike. Joe. I wrote Joe. I saw Mike.
People they can't tell us apart.
It's almost 10 o'clock. We know how I do here. So we have a motion. Is there any other discussion by the board? Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, so the clock is ticking. Okay, moving on to number 17, discussion and possible action to cancel the December 24th, 2019 school board member for possible action.
I move that the
I know
Carson
you all
City
wanna
School
be here
District
for
Board of
Christmas.
Trustees cancel the December 24th, 2019 school board meeting.
Second.
Motion by Laurel, second by Joe. Any other discussion by the board?
Bah humbug.
Yeah, what's wrong with all of you?
Any comments or discussion from the public? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Huh, good deal. Motion passes. Moving on to the consent agenda. Approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Looking for a second. I see everybody else is falling asleep too. Motion by Mike, second by Laurel. Any other discussion by the board? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to number 19, informational items. Those are all there. And then you'll notice that we do have our annual Carrie Pryor new hire cookies and milk on December 16th. And Chartwell's has been nice enough to sponsor the Friday night buffet dinner for the NASB conference. So just to let you know, and she says that significant others are welcome, so put that on your calendar, because we'll be there Friday night. Okay, any other discussion on that? Seeing none. Moving on to number 20, request for future agenda items. I would guess there's been a question about maybe having a workshop on the rezoning and Snyder, and don't know if you got a feel for that. So is there any feel for having a workshop before? It would probably be the next meeting, because the 26th is getting piled up here. So it'd be meeting at 6 o'clock to have a workshop to go over.
I think we're all clear on. Yeah, I don't know that I'm gonna be. maybe just have
You guys are feeling comfortable?
For now, yeah.
And with the rezoning and all? Mr. Stokes? No, but your green button's on.
Try it one more time, there we go. I would just add that there's still this question about EVMS that I would like to have some clarification on. So if we do need, and it doesn't necessarily have to be during a workshop of some kind, but I do want to make sure that we're in concert. I want us to be in lockstep.
I think more of mine with the Eagle Valley is I'd really want to meet there at the school and let the neighborhood know that we're going to be looking at that, because I don't think it's fair to ask them to come to a board meeting. I would much rather go to Eagle Valley and invite the neighborhood and say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're thinking about doing, this is what our bond oversight committee has suggested to us, and get their kind of feedback so that they don't feel out of step like they have before when we've made changes to Eagle Valley.
Okay.
And I don't know if that would happen before the beginning of the next year either, though, with everything going on. Don?
No, I guess I probably should have said that. I mean, I'm happy to see it today on that. I mean, the feedback that I get, it's probably our biggest overcrowding issue we have is the middle schools, and it's the first thing we should deal with, and I think we should deal with it soon.
And I think you're gonna see that when we have our star rating presentations too.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Like I said, I went to that talent show at Carson Middle School, and all those kids and all those bleachers, and I was sitting in the middle of them all. I was quite intimidated, really, but it is very crowded, yeah.
Any other future agenda items? Okay.
wants to come back for something.
Yeah. What other policy can we get you here for, Mark? Just kidding. Okay, seeing none, I adjourn this meeting. Thank you, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. 3 weeks, that's even better.